Hey, everybody, this is Scott Homan with the Witness Underground podcast. Today we have a really special guest. This is Sian Walmsley, who is our story editor on Witness Underground, the documentary. How you doing, Sian?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing good. It's been a whirlwind last few months with the Kickstarter. But yeah, things are good. It's really interesting because you and I never actually had a conversation about how the film was made. And so I wanted to talk about some of those things, how we did it, what were some of the challenges, and get into some of the weeds about decisions on and this film. It's become a 6-year long. Actually, I'm like 8 years into this topic,
Yeah.
making content on the topic. And so thank you for being a huge part of making the film a success. The film won an
Of
award. It went to
course.
11 festivals, but you're a big part of that.
Aw. Aw.
Yeah. And you have a novel out, but like, are you still doing work with film and editing? Is that still a part of your
No, I
world?
kind of moved away from it. I think I wanted to tell my own stories, but I do value my time as an editor a lot.
What are some of the other projects you worked on with film that were of note?
Ooh, I did a year at a marketing agency, which was interesting. Did a lot of advertising. Um, Other than that, it's very difficult to find projects are that you can really put your heart and soul into, I think. And this was one of them, for sure. Um, but I think I started to move towards telling my own stories eventually. But yeah,
What's the
nothing really
topic of
worth
your
of note.
What's the topic of your own story, just to give an idea for anyone who wants to check out your book?
Oh, it's a romance novel. It's like a complete 180 from what I'm used to. Usually I'm into like horror and thriller, but I kind of stumbled into romance. The name is The Devil Drinks Mocha, Part 1, under my other name, Sian Krubeck, because I was
Okay.
editing with my maiden name, Sian Walmsley. So
Yeah.
yeah, if you like romance, check it out.
So is it a true story based on your relationship
Oh
with
no,
your
no, no, no,
husband?
no, no.
Okay.
No. That would be
Like in my
interesting.
dreams. No. It's
No.
not autobiographical then.
No, 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 no.
Cool. It's a fun title. What's the title again? With Mocha.
The Devil Drinks Mocha.
The Devil Drinks Mocha. Cool. You'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
I'm excited for you. It's an important step. I have quite a few friends and a lot of people that got involved more recently with the film are authors. And
Mm-hmm.
turns out if you want to run a crowdfund, having authors on your team is better than musicians. No offense to my musician friends that helped out. But authors write all day, and Kickstarter's basically all about writing people or running any kind of
Mm-hmm.
crowdfund. So it's interesting to find out, okay, one of our other film crew members is also an author. Like, okay,
Yeah.
there's a trend here. I should
But
write a book, I think.
yeah, you should do it.
Cool. I'm actually thinking about that's a whole side thing, but we launch into separately. But I actually, because of all the authors that have been attracted to the Witness Underground project and have been on the show as an interviewee, and I want to help promote their books, that I have like a collection, half of my laptops right now stacked on a bunch of my journals from when I was a teenager to my early 20s, and I brought them with me. I'm now living in Central America to dive into my past and to write a memoir, self-help memoir, like every other chapter is something else.
Mm.
So I'm also trying to dive into my personal story, where like the Witness Underground is that in a sense it's autobiographical because my story is so similar. I'm not in the film, and my story is not in the film. I realized that I kind of want to do. I'm almost on a similar trend as you, maybe a few years past behind, but want to put my story out in a more serious way. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a really interesting journey because, like, yeah, now I have skills for filmmaking, but like maybe I should write a book. It's like a whole different world, right?
Yeah, it is.
Let's get into the movie and the process.
Yeah.
You had done a few films before that, or like at the same time as Witness Underground. What is your process in general?
It depends. I did a couple of documentary shorts before Witness Underground, and I've also done some narrative a feature-length narrative film, very independent. I think it's streaming now somewhere. It's called Darkness Has Covered My Light, I believe. It was a very long time ago. With narrative film, you get a script and you just kind of follow the script, you pull the footage together. With documentary, usually a director will come to you as an editor and say, here's a general idea that I had when I recorded this, but here's everything that I have. Make it work. Turn it into something.
Yeah. I know we had that
So
conversation. I remember exactly where I
yeah,
was when you and I had that conversation. I was like
where were
standing on a
you?
street corner outside of an alley in Denver in South Broadway, like one block off of the main drag, South Broadway, and
Uh-huh.
just like pacing back and forth, having this conversation like, well, I've got like 12 interviews, but 5 of them are really important and they're all tied together. And I think there might be a story there that like, I just, it's all foggy in my mind, but I think you're like, are you sure? And I was like, no, but I'm just going to give you the footage and like, and then you kind of had it for a long time. And I was just hoping that
Mhm.
it like, I was just like, Hail Mary, like, Sean, save this. I'm so emotionally exhausted by this story. Can you please make my vision come true? I have
Yeah,
12 or
I
15
got
hours of
that.
footage or something.
Yeah, I got that impression from you that you'd put so much of your time and your own resources into filming and traveling, and you know, you wanted to make something, but I think you were getting to a point where you might have been burnt out by the whole thing. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah. No, no, no,
interpreting that
definitely.
wrong or not.
I took on
So,
it's such a big task to make a movie, and it's such a
yeah.
big task to do a crowdfund. It's such a big task to do the production of a movie. I when I first crowdfunded, I was like, oh, I make videos all the time. I've been doing this for 7, 8 years or whatever with my other projects in Vietnam and my music stuff and my music documentary. That I was still sort of editing it, but I'd put out a cut. Anyway, I was just like, I could probably do this. I don't know by the end of the year. But like
Mm,
the day I prepped for 2 months for the crowdfund to launch and get some funding to do the movie, and the day
mm,
it was March 1st, 2018, when I pushed launch on Seed and Spark for crowdfunding, I was like, I cannot believe that this is the beginning. I'm burnt out. And then it was like 16-hour days for 30
mm,
straight days without any breaks at all. And it was insane. And the first 2 weeks we got like, it was like 20% funded. And it took
mm.
that was like half of the campaign to get like 20% funded. I was like, this is a failure. Oh my God. Anyway,
Oh
so like I
no.
was by the end of the crowdfund, I was like beyond burned out. And then we went and shot it like the next month. And that was like 8 crazy days when that was already enough to be burned out. And then I went and shot like 5 more interviews and over the course of like a month and a half with other people unrelated to the topic, but like for the same general project. So when you and I finally talked, I was back in Denver. It was all Minneapolis, Wisconsin. I drove back to Denver and it was like, no way. I can't even like think about this topic anymore. And it was June, I think. And I'd started like preparing for this in January 1st. So it's like,
Mhm,
I'm 5, 6 months into chaos. And like,
mhm,
and then I never even I'd heard of a story editor and I knew I wasn't good at it. And then you and I had worked on the Ross episode for XW coming out, which was like the
mhm.
pilot episode, um, which you knocked it out of the park. I remember that too because I would like spent like 6 months making like 3 cuts, and you looked at them and you're like, I can take that and turn it into one cut that's like 10, 15 minutes long. And I was like,
And you
no,
hated it.
no, actually, it's so good. It's so good. It's so good, and that's why, like, I was like, I think we can do this. She's already proven that she can take a complicated personal story and turn it, and it's like my passion project, and turn it into something that I'm proud of. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, the process wasn't smooth, so maybe we can talk about some of that. But yeah, okay,
Yeah.
so you're going into I am cutting in so much here, but
No,
I
you're
gave
good.
you the fuzzy. This is my vision. Make it real.
Yeah.
Then what's the next step for you?
I just watched all the interviews one after the other, start to finish. Um, Took notes, kind of pulled key quotes from everyone,
Hmm.
and then yeah, I start with interviews exclusively. I think that is the foundation of a documentary is the interviews, the people, the voices, and then once you have that down, then you start putting in your B roll or your the footage of the people doing things that might relate to what they're saying, or the archival footage. And you kind of build up from there. So it was just about taking all of their stories and trying to figure out a way to make an audience member interested if they've never heard of Jehovah's Witnesses before, care about the people that they're listening to for I don't remember the runtime exactly.
It's 83 minutes. The final version is 83 minutes.
Oh, right. Okay. There's been so many versions.
Yeah. We'll get into that.
and just trying to create like just, peaks and valleys, like not necessarily like with interest and boredom, but more like, this is a really interesting bit. Now that we've done the info dump on you, we're going to get personal now, and then we're going to bring it back, and then, give people hope by the end of it. So that was my process, really, was just listening, taking notes, and then kind of doing the jigsaw puzzle of putting it all together so that we would focus on different sections of the film. I feel like the intro was like, this is what Nuclear Gopher was and how it started. And then it became, okay, this is like the Jehovah's Witness part of it. And now we're moving into like the evolution of these people's lives, like how they got out of it, how they pushed through something so difficult, and kind of ending it on a sort of bittersweet note, really, because it's awful, what some of these people went through, but it's also a joy that they got through it and music helped them. So
yeah,
that was my process.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's a really nice way to define what the chapters are, and that there's about 3 chapters or three significant chapters. They're not all the same length. And there's one, the middle part about Jehovah's Witnesses, it's kind of like Ryan tells his awakening story, or his like big epiphany moment. Yeah. And so much of our back and forth, and we had our producer, associate producer, Ryan Duvall, was giving a lot of feedback as like a third person between you and I were doing all the work. And he was like, yeah, well, what about this? What about that? And giving another viewpoint, which is really, really helpful. And we had many, many iterations and many, many back and forths over the course of a year for that. But one of the things that he kept saying was like, this is the most important part of the film. It needs to start there. That's the hook, which I don't know that he's right or wrong there. You and I ended up making all the actual final decisions. But it's funny because we kept on trying to put that moment earlier and earlier in the movie. And it just kept on having, there's so much, like the first 30 minutes of the movie is so jam-packed full, accomplishing so many things. It accomplishes humanizing the characters to get you to care, as you said, which I think I've to label it as humanizing. It's like, well, most films don't show you who a cult member really is. And like, here's a way to do that, which makes this film so unique. It's not that other films don't do it, but like you're doing it in a way that's like, well, you're to see them as active members through archival footage and music, and that's a very unique lens to look through. And then we're also teaching you about what their religion really is. We give the people of course, they don't celebrate birthdays and holidays and Christmas, and they go knocking on your doors. Everybody in the world pretty much knows that. But also they're a doomsday cult, and also they're expecting genocide to happen soon, and they're going to be the only survivors, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's like 30 things you learn about Jehovah's Witnesses and how they treat women and different things in the beginning that all builds up. Okay, so here's these people, here's their music, here's their art in Nuclear Gopher, but this is the context they were making it in. These are the ideas that were like in their universe that they were raised within, and here's the bars of their cage that they're trapped within, that they're slowly starting to realize what it really is and what the pressures are. And what's like when you gave me a cut, I think it was like spring 2019 or like midwinter or something. And it was like 2 hours long. You're like, I took the 12-hour interviews and I turned them into 2 hours. And now it's you and me need to work on cutting at least 30 minutes out of this to make it into a feature film length, maximum 90 minutes. And I was like, cutting 30 minutes out, that should be easy. I think think we spent like a year, and it wasn't like, oh, this entire section can go. And then at one point you're like, what if we cut out an entire human being? Because like that would definitely make it easier to cut out 30 minutes. And like, and because it's a lot of people, like that's also one of Ryan
Yeah.
Duvall's inputs is like, we like getting to know 5 human beings all like after the next, like we don't title them very often. Should we title them more? Like, who are they?
Hmm.
Who are they related? It's like you only get like one little piece of information, like I knew Cindy, or I was friends with Ryan, and then like we go into this whole story, and it's like, do you remember that little bit? So having 5 people is also a lot. But yeah, like that challenge turned into like a 1 year of back and forth between
Hmm.
you and I, where I would do some
Hmm.
cuts, or I would make suggestions, or we'd do. Our process was this: I used Descript, your favorite app ever. And it
I
was a
love
brand new
it.
AI where I took the dialogue, I stripped the like I took the video itself. They could turn the video itself and turn it into this the transcription text, and you'd have them side by side. And you could copy and cut and paste the text, and it would move the video clips to go with it. So with that, I was able to fast, and I loved that concept. It had a lot of bugs, really buggy software, lots of problems, and it didn't cut nicely, but it did help me rearrange things in my mind. And so like that was my tool. And then I would take that text, give it back to you as a Google Doc, and like, okay, move these pieces here, which I knew was a pain in the butt, but also it helped me like do a thing I've never had to do before. How was that, and what tools would you recommend someone else to use, or method that would be better than that?
I mean, this was a while ago that we used Descript. I think I remember thinking while we were using it, simply, why aren't we just doing this in Adobe Premiere? Like, why
Mm-hmm.
are we using this thing at all? But then I think that for you, you like to see text. I think it helps you.
Yeah, it was easy to cut
Um,
like what we didn't just remove a whole person. We removed like the last half of a sentence like
mhm,
100 times, or like someone would say something, and then they would stumble, and then they would start again with a new way of saying it, and we had that all
mhm,
in, and it was like, oh well, I like the way he started it, and I like the way he ended it, but I don't like the middle bit
mhm.
where they restarted or the stutter. So like I'm going to cut out just that middle bit. And it would like, seeing it in text was like, did okay, well, let me like, okay, so Jehovah wants to kill everybody, or whatever the thing. Like cutting it into something more cohesive was easier to see when the text was so like filled with terrible grammar. So I was like, oh, I don't know. As a writer, maybe you can understand that, but like seeing terrible
I,
grammar and editing that was easier than like being gripped by an interview, and like, I don't know. Also seeing it
I
side by
think,
side with like their facial expressions and the
yeah, I
emotion
think
that
for
came with it.
me, I have a question for you. Do you watch TV films with the subtitles on?
Almost never, actually.
Okay, I
I kind
thought
of don't
maybe you
like
were
it.
going to say yes.
Yeah. I do now, but I'm dating someone who's from a different language. So like subs are essential to enjoy the
Oh,
movie
okay,
together. I'm
right.
more like a no subs person, but
Interesting. I
I find
think,
it a
yeah,
distraction because I'm a visual person. I want to like focus on the actual visual arts of it and be captivated
mhm.
by their visual arts choices. And I'm totally analytical too. I'm like, that's a very strange choice, or like that was an amazing, like that's, I would like to do it that way in the future. I'm always like thinking about making something when I watch TV.
I think the thing with Descript, going back to it, that would have made it an incredible tool would be if they could put that somehow create a Adobe file
Yeah.
with the text that we cut together and then put it into a project
Yeah,
so
no, I'm
that
totally with you. And they had
that would have been
they had a
amazing.
they had something, but they made it so like you could only it only worked with one microphone. They basically took
Mm,
all the audio, and they turned it into one track,
mm-hmm,
and then turned it into a mono track. So it had no stereo. And so I'm working with like, well, at the time it was just dialogue, but it was 2 microphones plus the camera audio. And so they were like mixing all of the bad camera audio with all the good audio that was like, some of it was synced and some of it wasn't quite right. And it was like, if you put that into Premiere, then we can't edit in Premiere. because we've just lost all of our valuable audio. And I wrote them so many times. I'm like, this is killing us. And they're like, we're never going to add that feature. At some point they were like, we're going to add that feature. Oh my God. And then at some point they turned to like, we don't care about video anymore. We're going to go to podcasting. Really? And so they were like, we're never going to add that feature. It was like over the course of like a year or two of using it. I started using it for my podcast as well. And they were like, yeah, you're one of our early adopters and you're in beta. And then they went to, we don't care about you as a customer at all. Bye. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That would be an amazing feature. And I don't think anything like it exists to this day. And we're talking about 6 years ago, a pioneering company in the AI podcast, video editing space still hasn't added the feature where you can use a professional tool integrated with their tool. It's genius. I wanted it so badly. You wanted it. Still doesn't exist, I don't think.
It was an interesting process using it, because I think as the editor, the only issue I had was when you would go into the script and start moving stuff around, I would have to like go and like make a little checklist of everything you did and then do it in Adobe Premiere.
Yeah.
And that was the only real issue I had with it. Because in my mind, I was like, why don't we just do this straight in, Premiere? Right. Why don't we just go in and do it that way? But I think for you, correct me if I'm wrong, seeing the text was an important aspect of seeing the story.
Yeah, that, and I didn't want to mess with the pro files and your system of organization. I wanted to like, here's what I think would work better. And then I would like basically write the movie with text. Like by cutting and pasting, and then be able to watch it and be like, I think that works better. What do you think? And it was like a separate place to do testing of ideas and flow of conversation. But I also felt like so overwhelmed by it because I have worked on so many short docs and one other feature doc, and then my own little documentary with Hanoi Mixtape about Hanoi music scene, which almost has no story, which I realized after making it and working on this with you, like, oh, my first film doesn't have a story. I'm so glad I'm working with a story editor because I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't know how to hit this. Yeah. Yeah. When it's more about music and like, it's more just like a sit back and have a joint and like enjoy like my live music, relax, have it in the background kind of thing. But it's kind of like a travelogue. Like there's not a lot of depth to someone riding in a bus across like a new country for them. It sort of has that vibe to it. But yeah, like working with you on the deep story notes. And I really wanted to hit these important parts in the story of the movie, but I didn't know how to do it. And like after watching it so many times, I'm sure you also, I mean, I'd like to hear what you think of this. Like I was getting like story fatigue. Like, I don't know if this emotionally hits better than the last 10 versions. Like and then it was getting, for me, it was exhausting to go back and forth. And I'm sure we both had pulling our hair out moments when and like, God damn it, Scott, why are you changing shit? And I definitely had some of those moments getting another version from you. I'm like, why did she change it? Like, I was happy with that. But you're like, no, this is a better version and I know it. I'm like, well, what decisions did you make and why? And you're like, I'm in charge here. This is, I don't know. I don't know what I just imagined that, but I was exhausted and it was frustrating. But at the same time, at some point I was broken and I was like, Sean is in control of the story and I'm no longer going to have an opinion.
And I hate her.
there was definitely those moments, but at the same time, like that's a part of giving up control. Like as a director, I made the choice of who to shoot with, what topics to ask, what camera to use, camera angles, audio. I'm not happy with all of my decisions, but there's a lot of decision making that comes with any creative process. And by hiring you and collaborating in a professional way, it's important for me to give up control and to like trust that you're going to do a good job. And I think you did a great job. And that's a testament to like it getting accepted in film festivals and it winning an award, that like trusting your work was a good choice.
Thank you. I feel as an editor, when you work with a director, the director usually is heavily personally invested in what they have done. And when they give an editor their work, their project, whether you want to compare it to giving them their child, or maybe
Yeah.
they crafted a beautiful painting and then they're giving it to you as the editor to like make changes, that it's hard for them to let go. And I
Yeah.
feel sometimes there was those moments when you, Scott, were like, you were you were just so invested in these people and in this project, and when I would make changes, it felt like you took it more personally,
Definitely.
perhaps. Whereas I kind of had to like remain kind of harsh and like, no, like we can't keep going back and forth. We have to like make a decision. And it's tough as an editor to do that. It can be it was draining for me too, like emotionally as well, because I loved what we did together. And when you get to nearing the end and there's like all these little tiny tweaks that are being done, it's just like, now I just want it to be over. Like,
Definitely.
just let's just say it's done. But then one of us was saying, no, we got to do it better. And I think one of the big things, kind of going off tangent here, is the coloring of it. Because I
Mm.
was kind of, at the time, I was working with a marketing agency and I was doing coloring a certain way that I had been trained. And you, coming from your photography background, I think I did a pass of the color. You were just like, this is shit. Like, you need to, this isn't good, in so many words. You didn't say it like that, but so you really pushed me, I think, to like train harder. And like, I
Mm.
completely erased everything that I'd done, like hours of work doing it this one way. And then I did it a different way. And I was super happy with how it came out in the end.
Oh,
So I
good.
think we were both growing as creatives with this project as it was happening. Like me as an
Yeah.
editor, you as like the director, and yeah, it did get very emotional by it. We didn't talk for a while. I feel like it was, once it was over, it was like, okay, take it, and just go, leave me alone. But I
Yeah.
think that that's more because it meant so much to us, I think.
Yeah.
What do you feel about that?
Yeah. Colors was interesting. And I think you did a great job. Like
Thank
I mean,
you.
I'm still looking at it all the time. Um, and it's like the color, it's there, and I feel like it has a complete like harmony and consistency from beginning to end. And what I
Mm-hmm.
learned, because I was putting it in your hands, I'm like, you already colored this scene, and then the very next time it's different. Like Eric's purple. Why is Eric
Yeah.
purple? I mean, it's not
Mm-hmm.
purple. It's like a tiny hue shift, right? Like I'm being super nitpicky
Mm-hmm.
about a particular scene, but it's like, yeah, well, I filmed with like professional lights, but I also had daylight flooding in the room and
Mm-hmm.
shot over the course of 2 hours in a partially clouded Midwestern town where every 10 minutes a huge puffy cloud goes in front of the sun flooding in from the window. And that window light
Mm-hmm.
looks gorgeous sometimes. And
Yeah.
when the cloud is not there, it's a different color. And then there's like 14 things in the room reflecting light differently. And there's like a huge
Mm-hmm.
pink, window screen behind his head. Like there's so many things that are changing the color. And so like, yeah, like I pulled a cut from the beginning of the conversation and we put it later. And so like the color shift, it was like, yeah, it's different. Well, why is it different? Well, then I found out you had to redo the color for that scene for that 10
Mm-hmm.
second moment totally from scratch because there's a cloud, and there was stuff like that with
Yeah.
the audio too. Like there was an airplane. I spent 4 months just tweaking audio for a totally different topic. I was like, I cannot believe she said this important thing and we had to use this one sentence during an airplane, but there's an airport in the middle of the city and there's an airplane
Mm-hmm.
every 2 minutes, and each airplane lasts for 45 seconds. And it's like, I was filming in their apartment with all the windows and doors closed, but like that noise I spent 5 days trying to get rid of the noise and learn new tricks to get rid of that noise. As another kind of, you did deep dive on color and I did deep dive on audio.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, for sure, this film pushed our limits and pushed, and also we both did it completely in Adobe Premiere,
Yes.
right? You didn't use any other apps from Adobe, I don't think. I didn't either.
No, I did not.
Like Adobe Audition for audio. I did everything in Adobe Premiere, which is not
Hmm.
typical. And that's actually one of the things
No.
I would like to do, like a little how we made a film on a low budget in Adobe Premiere without any other software. It's
Hmm.
not the cheapest. It's like one of the more expensive apps now in the world for this, and I'm still
Hmm.
paying them. I don't want to be doing that anymore. But I'm thinking
Yeah.
about making a how we did it in Adobe Premiere, and I want to do it in a different software next time. I'm thinking about moving to Resolve, which is better at color. Also, that's the other
Yes.
crazy thing. Color, like my first film, I learned how to do LUTs. So I made a LUT for every single scene I shot, every interview, and that was a lot. I have like 100 LUTs individual because everything had a different lighting, whether it's artificial light or daylight or whatever. Everything's different. But then that made it have a consistency. And I was like, well, why don't you just like you make a new LUT for every scene? And that's a whole different way of doing everything. But like, and you had your way, and I don't know what it was. And I was just sort of like, okay, she's doing color, and I get to have the final say. So if I don't like it, I get to say, let's work harder on the scene or whatever. Um, but it was sort of,
So
it
the
was always
first,
like that chase of like time. Like, I want it to be over. And you're like, yeah, I want it to be over. Why isn't it over
yeah.
yet? And like, well, I don't like the scene,
Yeah.
so it's not over. And you're like, damn it. All right, he's pink. And I'm like, I don't want him to be pink. I'm like, okay, I'll work on it more.
There was,
And
I remember getting a little sassy with you, just saying, I did it, like, it's over. But then hearing your concerns and looking over it, I knew I was more angry at myself that it looked this way. And you're right. It didn't look right. It didn't look natural. It didn't flow. So the first time I did the color, I used the sliders. So if you go into the color tab
oh
in
yeah,
Premiere, and there's like different sections on the right hand side, and you can
it's like
just slide
temperature,
temperature,
hue,
hue, brightness,
dark
contrast, and
lights. Yeah, more the
so
basic
I
tools that
was
you see on any photo editing app.
yeah, you can see it all over the place. And I would have some of the color graphs up, and that was how I was taught to do it. So
Mm.
I thought, oh, here I am. I'm a professional. I know what I'm doing. And then when I sent it off to you, and you were saying like, da 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 da, this looks weird. This looks weird. Yeah, I had to go a bit further in, so I completely scrapped that, and I went into the levels instead, using the level graph,
Hmm.
making the curves, like going into the red channel, the blue channel, the green channel, and kind of like
Which is
just
not intuitive
adjust.
at all
No, it's
when you're
kind
in
of
that
like
world.
everyone I asked who I worked with at the time when they were using the levels and the curve graph. I said, "Well, how do you know what you're doing?" She's like, "I don't know. Just like this is the like the highlights, these are the shadows, and then you just kind of click around until it looks good." I
You're
mean,
like
I'm
using
sure
a
there's
two-dimensional graph and like just moving dots and a line, making a line have an S curve, or changing the
yes,
pulling the darks down, which is
yes,
like changing the line, be like, so,
yeah.
yeah.
I'm
Which
sure
is
there was
actually like I
like
learned how to do photo editing that way in photo
yeah.
photography school from an incredibly talented photographer, Craig McNitt, and he was showing us on Lightroom beta before Lightroom was out, and we were using Capture One Pro and also Adobe Photoshop. So we learned how to do it in all three apps, which had very similar tool sets, but it was like start with curves because that does the least manipulation to the image, and then
Hmm.
like all the slider stuff that you were initially starting with, that would be like the
Hmm.
final touches. If you needed any kind of
Yeah.
micro tweak, you would use that at like 1 or 3% or something.
Hmm.
um, but you try to do everything else in a way that was like didn't distort the digital file so much. And
Hmm.
I'd just been doing it like that way for years, like 15 years or something. So when I saw like
Hmm.
what you were doing at the beginning, I was like, oh no, no, we can't do it this way.
She
It has to be
sucks.
another way. But
No,
yeah.
it was a good but emotional process, I think, because it did take over a year to finish, right? In the edit.
Yeah, I think I gave you, well, we did some like rough cuts and story changes in 2019
Hmm.
and during that summer. And then my life was turned upside down. I moved to California and started a new job that just like I was in another world. And it wasn't really
Hmm.
until the pandemic hit. And then I was like, yes, this is awesome. There are no distractions. All I have to
Yeah.
do is stay at my apartment, and there's no FOMO. I can just work on this movie. And I think it was like 7 months or so of like
Mm,
really regular work to
mm,
finish the movie. And there were so
mhm.
many times where I was like, it's done. I'm so happy. What do you guys think? Let's do a screening. And I would show some
Yeah.
people. And then I'd be like, ugh, there's like 25 things in my notes. Okay, I'm going to change them. Then it's done. And then I did that. Like, we're on like version 230 years. I don't know. I stopped keeping track.
Yeah. There were a lot. I think
It's
there were
like
like 50 something in the end.
877, but I did some decade jumps there after a while. It's like, oh, we're no longer in the seven, we're in the eights now. 0.1, 8.12, 8.13, 8 point, it's 8.2 now. And I just
Final
now I'm at
underscore
8.77.
final final. This is the final.
The
No,
final, final,
this is the
final, final.
final.
Right. Was it 4 finals that I wrote in the title of this one? No.
Yeah.
5 titles. That's the finished one.
Have you made any
Yeah.
changes since I kind of finished my pass in the
Have
last
I?
few years? Yeah.
So the version that you wrapped on was the film festival version. So I
Yeah.
asked you to kind of rush an edit out to get it to South by Southwest in
Uh-huh.
2020, not knowing how film festivals work at all. So we
Mhm.
submitted it on the last day of the final deadline, which means basically all the films are already selected and you're just giving them free money and they're not going to watch it. So that sucked. But it was the first submission and it was my dream festival getting to South by Southwest. You really want to get in the early bird when the first festival first opens up submissions that you're like, people are like, oh, that film's interesting. I'm going to keep that in like the soft slot, or like that's a definite in. And then it's like every film that gets submitted later is in competition with your film. You don't want to be the film that's like competing for a slot that's already taken. You want to be the film in that slot. So be the first to submit. Film festival mastery class that I took from John Fitzgerald and Justin Giddings. That's like step one. You find out what festivals you think are a really good fit for your film, and then you submit on their opening day or their opening
Mhm.
moment. The programmers will start watching your stuff. They're excited. They're fresh. If you submit at the end, you're paying the most. You're having the least possibility of getting in, and you have fatigued programmers. Anyway, so that was the cut that was like, okay, everything from now on is my job. Like Sean's been paid. She's over it. I know that I don't want to bother her anymore. Like I've pushed our relationship to the brink of disaster. I am now in
Oh, it
charge of any
wasn't
kind of
that
final edits.
bad.
But
I
I
think
didn't
with
change any
COVID,
color.
yeah, with COVID, it was like, I think it was just like everyone's world went upside down.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you were like, okay, I can focus on this thing, whereas I was like, holy shit, what am I going to do for work now? I've lost
Mm.
the consistent work that I had that was paying, and now everything kind of became about how am I going to survive, how am I going to make money,
Mm.
which is
And
kind of
then you
the
have me
struggle.
turning on,
And then
putting
you're like,
pressure on you for the.
I can do this. Da, 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 da. Like, Scott, I'm sorry. I just can't do it anymore. Because I
Yeah.
didn't want
And
to
to
be
be totally
cheeky and
fair,
say, like, hey, can you pay me more? You know, and I'll totally do this because I didn't want to make it seem like I was only in it for the money, which, you know, wasn't true. But at the same time, there was this personal conflict of I need to make time for things that pay. And it was really that's the struggle of being a kind of full-time artist as it is. Like you have to make those decisions, but I am still very proud of what we did and the final cut that we did.
yeah, me too. And to be clear about our deal, it was basically, hey, I'm giving you a friend price. I'm sure
Mm,
editing a whole movie usually costs like a lot, and you gave me
yeah,
a rate that I could afford,
yeah,
and I mostly was able to afford that with the budget of the Seed and Spark. I mean, not
yeah,
it was probably like half that because I was really living on a budget and not
mm-hmm,
paying rent anywhere because I was traveling and
mm-hmm,
like anyway. So I had made this bunch of money, went and shot everything on a super budget, and then when I talked to you, it was like, okay, we can. Here's the rate for everything in these. It was like 5 payments for 5 different aspects of the movie or
mm-hmm.
installments, and But it was also clear that this wasn't your primary focus, that you had other work that was paid and that you were going to dedicate like 1 or 2 days a week to it when it made
Yeah.
sense or something. So it wasn't
And it
like a
sucks that
full-time
you have,
gig.
yeah, it sucks that you have to make that decision, because I kind of went into this career hoping that I could just make art and help people tell their stories. But then there comes a point where it's like, well, you got to make money to survive. And I think one
Yeah.
of the reasons why I transitioned away from editing into writing was just because it was much more flexible, that,
Mm.
I could do some sort of part-time work to get some income, but then focus on my art whenever, and no one else is relying on me. No one else is, I'm not slowing anyone else down, because sometimes it was very difficult to say those things to you, like, oh, hey, like, I can't do it as fast as you want me to because I've got this other stuff that I have to do in order to be able to eat this month.
Hmm.
um, it's a it's a hard life, but it's not one that I would say steer clear of. It's definitely not for everyone, um, but if you can work really hard at it, you can make it happen. I think it just so happened that COVID really knocked the wind out of my sails, um, as a freelancer. I don't know where I'm going with this. Please interrupt me at any point. I'm getting
No,
very
it's a really
personal.
interesting topic because so many people
Yeah,
in the industry or who want to be are doing it that way, or they're
yeah.
doing like, well, you talked about like helping people tell their stories and doing art as like the goal, but it's not your art. In this case, it was my art, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're a hired person to help make something. It's not your vision, it's my
Mm-hmm.
vision. And I mean, your work is there, but it's definitely like a story that you're not involved in, right? Like you're not a
Mm-hmm.
former cult member who was a
Mm-hmm.
musician. So it's like when you first think, because I've done a lot of creative work with other people as well. Like I worked on a lot of documentaries and a lot of like NGO stuff, and commercial work and like advertisement type videos. And at some point, I was like, I don't want to do this stuff for other people. I want to do this kind of thing for me, which is why I started this whole project. And it's like it's a lot to take on, and you have to love it. And so like I can totally understand that, like, yeah, working on someone else's art, even if it's for
Mm-hmm.
money, isn't necessarily the most inspiring situation. Working on your own art is the thing that drives us forward. And so I think it's super important, no matter what creative work that you're in, that you have your own thing that you're developing to like to
Yeah.
put your passion and heart into. Did you find that true with your book or other creative outlets?
Yeah, I started to write during a time of my life where I felt like I was failing as a video editor. And it all started with fan fiction, funnily enough.
Hmm.
I just, I was playing a video game. I thought, that guy's hot. I'm going to go online and look if other people think he's hot. So I'm validated. Stumbled into like Tumblr and all that shit. And I found that it was a community of people writing fan fiction. It just looked like so much fun. And after
Hmm.
having so many years and years of helping other people tell their stories, I just kind of like ran with this like fan fiction thing, and people really responded to it, which is why my first book is a romance novel, because it was kind of like, well, people really like this, so I'm going to make this into a book. But now my brain is like swirling with other ideas like fantasy and horror and kind of more of the stuff I'm into, because romance
Hmm.
isn't really my number one genre. Um, and I think it flipped a switch of like, I think I really want to tell my own stories, like make my own worlds.
Hmm.
Not that it sounds like I'm dunking on video editing, but I loved my time as a video editor. I loved working on this, like piecing everything together in a way that makes the finished project work. It's so satisfying. Like I remember the first film that I edited was my own little student film when I was like 17 or 18, and sitting behind the computer and piecing it all together. I just loved it so much. So I did, and I still do really love editing. And I would still do it if someone came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to edit this thing?" I'd be like, "Sure." Like if
Mm-hmm.
I've got the time, I'll do it if it looks interesting to me. Um, I think, uh, but yeah, writing was kind of like it kind of opened up. Like, no, I think I really want to be in control. Like, I want to be the director of my projects from here on out.
Yeah.
Um, so that transition. But helping you tell this story, it was really eye opening, and I really learned a lot about the Jehovah's Witnesses. Like as you said before, like everyone knows that they knock on the door and tell you about their beliefs. They don't celebrate Christmas or birthdays. But listening to people who had been within it was just so fascinating. And I loved piecing their story together in a way that would engage an audience and raise awareness, but also show that, like you were saying, you don't really see many documentaries about the members itself. You tend to see just the overarching, like this is the cult and this is what they did and this is the leader. Whereas I
Right.
loved working with you on this because it was like, here are these people, here are their stories, and here's how they felt in that moment, and here's what they're doing now. So
Yeah, we got to
even
play
though
kind
I
of
did
both.
move away, yeah, go ahead.
We get to play with both sides. I wish that we could have gotten someone who is still inside. Like that would have made the dynamic of the documentary so much more rich. But in a way, we got that because over time, we have everyone who was interviewed were Jehovah's Witnesses. They can speak from that perspective, and we have archival footage of them as that doing and saying things from that perspective. And also, they then got out and then have the perspective of being out and why they got out and like the turning point for them. So in a way, we get it all from just those same five people. And we already have a challenge with almost too many people in the movie to make it easy to follow. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like we don't usually get the insider view. Even in I think it was A&E Cults and Extreme Beliefs was a series that came out a few years ago. They interviewed, I think it was like 8 or 10 episodes, a different cult for every episode, and there's one on Jehovah's Witnesses. But out of I think it was 10, 8 or 10, whatever, one of the episodes had people in the religion, and that was the FLDS Mormons, where like it was like 14 wives of the cult leader who was in prison, and they would all together get on a video call with the imprisoned leader and then talk to their actual husband together as a group of women. Is like, oh my God, that's a unique view, because usually you only get the
Yeah.
I left and it was tragic story.
Yeah.
So we did a little bit of both of that in a sense over the period of like 25 years or 20 years,
Yeah.
inside and out.
Did you see is it Mother God on HBO?
I haven't seen that one.
It's I think it's pretty new. It's 3 episodes, but it's about a cult, and pretty much all it's like a 50-50 split between interviews with people who are still in it right now and they're the family members of the people who have been affected. It's very interesting.
Hmm.
And quite rare, I think.
Yeah,
But we did it
that's
first.
cool. Yeah, and that's a thing that's been really fascinating. Is I mean, I had a vision for a film that never existed. Not that obviously, this film didn't exist when I had a vision for it, but like I wanted to make it because nothing like it existed, and I wanted to tell a story and frame it in a way that would make me proud of my past and also the people that are in it proud of their past. Like, hey, there's something to celebrate here. Also, it's tragic, and here's why, and here's the danger, and there's a lot of elements to it, and a lot of little sub themes that we were able to draw out. Like basically everything I pitched to you in that cold Denver alley about like, here's the footage, here's what I want. I mean, we hit all those notes, and it wasn't like it happened magically and simply because we're both geniuses. and super talented. But like over time, you know, we worked all those elements in and we dropped things that didn't serve those purposes. And there was a lot of very deliberate choices on both of our parts for why the film is the way it is. But I feel I'm really proud of it. And the people that write in after they've watched it, they're like, I cried 4 different times for completely different reasons. I'm like, awesome. We made a film filled with triggers. Yeah. Like we both love horror and your horror film background. Like, yes, we like got people to have raw emotions experienced during them. Which, yeah, it's like, is that a good thing? I think I started going to therapy in the film festival run or after going through that, because I had like my first panic attack with this movie. So like and I went to therapy and I learned about like abuse, emotional abuse and narcissism, narcissistic abuse. And like, and I think that what's emerged from making this film for me and like the podcast flow, it's come to light after doing this project that this film is really about accelerating the path to healing using art and art therapy without even really realizing that that's what it was, because I had never done art therapy and I never looked into it, but I did art therapy after going to the film festival, and I was like, okay, so this is real and I have a lot to work on personally. And I thought that the film would help with that, but the film helped me discover that I like many human beings, have stuff in my past that was difficult. So like, it's good to get mental health care and sort that stuff out. The faster and the sooner, the better. It's not like you can finish it. Like, it's probably a lifelong thing. But then it's like, well, it's not just me who realized that from watching the movie or making a movie. It's like people that watch the movie are like, oh, this is serious. I should get help. And I think that's valuable. There's a lot of value there. We're not just attacking the religion, which a lot of films on the topic do. Like, we almost don't even talk about them. We just talk about like the human side of what goes on in the dynamic of the culture.
Which is why I wanted to put those little segments at the end where they talk about what they liked about being a Jehovah's Witness. Because it is interesting, because it's easy to demonize everyone within it. But these are real people who were born into it or their families got them into it. And yeah, I felt that was a good call for us to end the film on it wasn't all terrible. Like, there was a sense of community there, even though there were some awful, awful things. Just having that, just balancing that scale a little bit. Having those
it ends in
moments
such
in the film,
the last like 15 minutes of the film, the third chapter, as you described it, like what happens, the bittersweet, like modern day reality for these people. It's like, I tell people it's like a big exhale, like okay, we just went through a roller coaster of emotions and experiences over the course of like 10 years of life for these people within 60 minutes. You have like a decade of 5 people's lives. And it was a lot to handle. And we learned a lot. We saw a lot. We experienced a lot. We went through the emotions. And now it's sort of like we're here in the present day. They're playing music. You see like the rise of Cindy, like as like a rock goddess finding her voice, and with her band High TV. And like all those little moments, like what happened to your kid? Oh, well, that was the best thing ever, because like the 9-year-old saw through all the bullshit. Like, that's a fun moment.
I love
or like
that.
Cindy's realizations about the supernatural, and that it was very like a women's empowerment like moment that she had as a young woman, and like the really powerful message even for an adult. And then Ryan sort of like, it was terrible what he went through. Like, no one should have to go through that. But even still, he is deeply charitable towards the people inside. Like, all these kind of like life philosophy viewpoints that they got from this really tragic situation that have shaped them and hopefully will shape others. Like, I feel like it just takes all the pressure off, and all the tension of the movie just like dissipates into like, cool, we can be okay.
Yeah, for sure.
And it was also like I felt like the easiest part to edit. Sorry. What did you say?
No. Yeah, ending on Ryan's son. The little. You say you didn't believe in any of it? Nope. I just couldn't stop laughing when I first saw that, and I remember seeing it and thinking, oh, I gotta put this near the end of the film. Like,
Yeah, and that's and through all of our
yeah,
different that
yeah,
makes was like he had that so like where you put it originally or where it was originally was like, yeah, that makes sense. That was what his reality was in that moment. But as an audience member, it was like, oh, that's hilarious. Like that was I was just
mm-hmm.
crying, missing someone from the cult or whatever, or like I need to call my mom after this movie's over or whatever the reaction people have is. But then it's like even a 9-year-old saw through this. Oh man,
Yeah,
like it's such a levity moment because there's like laughter and there isn't
yeah.
really much laughter in the film until the end.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think it's one of those choices that we make in the edit. That's like, yeah, that's I don't know why that wasn't obvious before, but it makes it better.
Well, I always compare editing to doing a jigsaw puzzle. You can have like 1,000 pieces, and when you look at it, when you start, you're overwhelmed. But then once you start like analyzing each individual piece, you can start to put it together. But it feels like when you get to the very end of the jigsaw, it's so frustrating that you can't just finish it because
Mm-hmm.
surely I can do this. There's only a couple of pieces left. Why can't I figure this out?
But they're
But
all
when you,
textureless and they're all green, like bush foliage.
yeah,
So it's like seems insane. Like, how do you get through
yeah,
that?
yeah. But then when you slot those pieces in at the end, and it just feels really good. Like that's the final tweaks that we did when I was starting to move things like a bit more experimentally. Like, okay, this has been here for like 15 versions, but what if I moved it over here? Like, I'm sure it was kind of frustrating for you, but also that's the challenge of filmmaking. Like,
Mm-hmm.
always needing to look at it with fresh eyes, even though your eyes are not fresh.
Yeah.
And yeah, it
And
was
there's
a
something I'm doing
crazy
right now.
experience.
Yeah. There's something I'm doing right now, which is adding a couple of people to the credits. And so I'm like, oh, I have to export this movie again. I can't believe it. I have to do this again. I was done with it a year ago. Done. Like I put it out. And there's a
2024
version you can
done though.
watch. Yeah. So now it's a 2024 movie. And, and it's something that's like, it kept on growing over the course of the film. Like it was a Scott film with Ryan Duvall as a producer and Sian Walmsley Krubek as the editor. As three humans made this movie, but the credits say differently. There's like there's like 10 people in the above the line now, including graphics from Belgium, from Klaas de Loze, and a few other
Nice.
people that got involved. Anthony Mathenia came on as a co-producer, and there's a lot of people now that are in the credits. And then there's the special thanks section, which is like, well, there's a lot of people that participated in the actually be coming out series, season 1, and then there's a season 2, and then there's the people that really helped fund it during the Seed and Spark, and now we just did a Kickstarter, so it's like a whole other group of people that came on to help fund it, and that deserves something, and that really helps make the movie possible. And then there's people that have funded the Patreon, which is like an ongoing support way to keep the movie going. So the special thanks aren't just the people that like put us up for hospitality in Minneapolis when we filmed it, but like people that gave feedback or like people that emotionally supported me when it mattered. Um,
Yeah.
like all these little things. Like, okay, so there's like 80 people. So like when you watch film credits, if you ever watch them, they're gigantic, long lists of human beings, but they all played some part that are important, and that's what makes a
Mm-hmm.
film better. And the version of the film that was made by 3 human beings that we submitted to South by Southwest was a far cry. Well, it's the story's all there, but and the color was there. The audio is better
Yeah.
now. There's better soundtracking. There's
Mm-hmm.
new remixed audio. There's accurate subtitles. There's graphics on a bunch of scenes that were not good, with low res JPEGs that were blown up that are now like beautiful, graphically done. Someone's holding the CD in their hand, images. There's all little pieces that just made it all better that at some point were just like a low res image that we found from like archive.org, and we downloaded and we're like, let's
Mm-hmm.
put that there for now. And we thought that was done in 2020, and done was then 2023, turns out,
Yeah.
or 2021, a year later. Yeah, all those pieces come together, and good film requires a lot of human beings. But you're a very
Yes.
essential core part of that team. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for bringing me in on it. It was an honor.
It's like a big part of my personal history now. So it's an honor to have you.
You'll never forget me. Ha 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 ha.
Exactly. Well, there has been talk. We'll wrap up soon, but Ryan Sutter and James Zimmerman from the movie, like they are interested in developing more of their creative side. Like their kids are growing up, and their careers are on the more tail end. And so they're talking about like doing some more book projects and horror film stuff. So there could be some like future horror collaboration with you if you're
Oh, I
interested
would
in getting
absolutely
involved.
do that. Yes,
Yeah,
I love horror. Yeah.
cool, cool. Another thing I'm so curious about, and we can talk offline, but about your book, is it financially viable? Have you found a way to make money from literature?
It's all self published at the moment. So everything is unfortunately on Amazon.
You
Um,
want to? Is there another path you're going to do later, or is that the path that works right now?
for now, it's Amazon for now. I kind of like the idea of self publishing because just being my own boss, I guess, like not
Mm-hmm.
having strict deadlines. And there's been a few authors who were self published who eventually got signed on to publishing deals. Uh, that's kind of how I imagine it going if it goes that far with me.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, I'm just kind of focusing on kind of just getting the art out of my head onto the page,
Yeah.
getting the stories out, not worrying too much about the money side of it. Getting money from a different source that's more stable and doesn't take a lot of mental strain to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So for now, it's not like earning me a ton of money, but it's I can see the growth there. I was put in contact with a friend of a friend who she self-published and she's been doing it for a while now, but suddenly it kind of exploded for her, like social media marketing, book cover design, like just tapping into like all this the business of self-publishing, I guess. She gave me
Mm-hmm.
some great advice on what to do and how to promote myself. So right now I'm
Very
kind of
cool.
focusing on just getting the story out before I start like really going into like the marketing side of everything. So hopefully
That's
it'll grow
fascinating.
over time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I have this idea of putting together with all the authors involved, as I mentioned before, like I would be the first student, or maybe I find a couple other people that want to write something. And then we do interviews like this about how your process is to write a book, and then learn from
Yeah.
each author how to write a book. And then each student has their unique questions, as like building a flow in a kind of a course that's like, well, I'm inquisitive as a human being and I want to do this. Let's talk about how to learn from each other. But then like the nuts and bolts would be like a deeper dive into what you're learning by doing, which is that you did the self-publishing, you did the ISBN number and the book cover, and you're doing the marketing yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that is driving this is that what I've learned from distribution of this movie, Witness Underground, is that every step of the way there's parasites who want to take your money and offer you nothing and take zero risk, and own your art. And then it might just get shelved
Mm-hmm.
because it's not actually making money easily, so they don't really care about it, and they don't care because they have 100 other titles. The movie distribution world has been like a deep dive for me. Like, how do you do it? Well, I didn't think I was going to get ripped off at every turn, but and like, who do you trust? And like, well, people that want you to trust them want your money up front, and like they don't take any risks. So, and then they're always like, when you get involved with a distribution house, they're like, okay, now that you're signed on with us, here's where you need to spend your money, and here's who will do the advertising for you. And it's like, and you're going to pay them. It's like, you guys don't do any of that. Of what is the deal? So like, I've looked at all these contracts, and I've read so much that like the parallels between a book publishing company and a film distribution company, they do provide services, and they might be a good choice. They definitely like tell you where to spend your money, and that might work for the machine in the industry, and it might work, but it might not work. But they don't. What I've learned is like no one does any advertising for you. They just help you spend your money, or they spend your money and then bill you later. And it's very parasitic and not really necessary anymore. There's a lot of technology to do self-publishing. The only advice I've gotten that's been negative about that is that people that self-publish usually don't hire an editor, and that's sort of essential to like tighten up your story.
It's lucky that I'm married to a writer who's an excellent editor. But yeah,
nice
the
value.
editing. Yeah, my husband edited my book, which was fun.
Cool.
But if I
was
didn't
it similar
have
to how
him,
you and I edited the movie?
no.
A little bit more smooth.
A little bit more smooth, but yeah. What was I going to say? Yeah, I think if I didn't have him, it would be a different story, because editors require money, and when you're just starting out, you might not have a big budget. So, but I would recommend an editor, because he made the story so much more coherent. He saw things that I didn't, kind of like our relationship. It was kind of like that. You would see things I would be like, oh, I completely missed that. So it's still,
which is normal with any two human beings with different life perspectives and different skill sets. Like that's why a team makes a better movie, right? Or a better book.
Of course. Yeah, for sure. But then you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen.
You get the right cooks together. That's important.
Yeah. You gotta like who you're cooking with.
It's just so interesting to see the parallels between books and movies, and they seem completely like different worlds, but there's so many elements that are so similar in not only the processes that you have and the goal in the end, but also like the industry of how the system's set up, but also how like during the pandemic, like the dream of the 90s, I feel like became realized, like, oh, you can work on the internet, and that's now normal. That's what everyone talked about in the 80s and 90s. Like someday it's possible to work digitally, remotely. And now it's like, I don't want to ever have to go to an office. And I feel like the idea of self-publishing, it makes so much sense as long as you like tick a few important boxes, like getting a good editor be one of them. But like you can probably do all the rest of it yourself, and probably a publisher you're not going to be successful with a publisher. You need to like do all the marketing anyways. They expect that you as an author have an audience already who want your book. And if you don't, like it's still on you to do it. Like they're not going to get that for you.
It's interesting as well, because when I was marketing the first book, or the part one of this book, there was a lot of people who just DM me on Instagram like, hey, do you want me to feature your book on my Twitter account? Pay me $50. I have X amount of followers. And it was just like, I could see through it, but I can see how some people might think, oh, what a great opportunity, I'll definitely do it. But they don't realize that all those followers might be bots, or they might be people who don't engage with that person or that account. It's a very interesting but very similar world. I'm realizing now that you're talking about it. But yeah, I think the big thing with self-publishing is marketing yourself. It's a pain, but it's necessary. Social media has made it a lot easier, I think, especially TikTok, which is strange to me, that a video platform has been huge for self-published authors. Book talk is what they call it.
That's cool.
So yeah, learning about all this new ways of being able to get the word out there. And when I do really try hard to be on social media, be really active, I see my sales go up. So it's definitely working. It's just, you just got to keep going at it while balancing writing itself.
Right. That's the thing that's tricky. Everything I've read about having a successful YouTube channel, having a successful podcast, is being active in like weekly. It has to be weekly, whatever you're doing, to keep growing and keep maybe it's an algorithm thing, but I think it's also like humans are just like respond well to like a weekly pattern. I don't know why that is. But even me, like
Yeah.
I'm an avid podcast listener. I probably listen to like 30 or 50 hours a month of audiobooks and podcasts. And I want the next episode next week. If I'm, whatever my routine is, I go play volleyball on a bike in LA, like bike to the beach. I'm going to put on my podcast. I'm going to probably choose my favorite podcast or whatever I'm listening to that
Oh, it's
year.
Tuesday. That means this
Yeah.
podcast is out.
Yeah. It's just like if it's once a month or twice a month or it's random days, I won't think of it. But if it's always Tuesday, then it's like, okay, I'm going to check. I'll remember that. So yeah, and I'm not good at being consistent. I'm now setting up scheduling. I'll batch do a bunch of podcast episodes, and then I'll schedule them for once per week as like a send to the email list, send to social media, just to help. Because I don't work like I'm not a weekly routine oriented human being. I am a project oriented person, where I'm like, this is the vision I have. I need to go deep dive into it and go do a crazy amount of creative effort and organization, and then just like be absorbed in it. And then I'll have some framework or like the finished product or something, something new. But it's not like I'm able to put out a piece of that every week over the course of 6 months and then have it. It's not at all how my brain works. I'm like, everything's off. The whole world, I'm shutting all the switches off. And it's just me and this idea. And I go deep in it. Yeah. Interesting to talk about process. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, yeah. It's a process that I still am not consistent. I really need to be. But it's definitely...
On book talk or on writing?
Both.
Yeah.
I was really good about scheduling my Instagram posts, my TikTok posts. I was really good about writing them these days. But then when life gets in the way, it's like all gone, start from zero. But it's good to talk to someone else about it and commiserate. Yeah. And it also inspires me like, no, I really need to get back into that. Let's do it now while I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. I feel like there's a huge gap because we're talking about like a marketing agency, which you have experience, you said, at a marketing agency, but like there's a huge group of skill sets at a marketing agency. Like the person that writes the title of a post on YouTube or a newspaper or magazine article, like that's an entire job. Spicy titles. We call it clickbait now, but it's just, like what's the headline title on New York Post or whatever. And there's just so much from marketing agency. We're like, well, what if I just do all that? Well, do you have any of those skill sets? Like maybe you're good at some of it, but probably not all of it. And like, can a digital nomad or like an independent creative do all of that and be successful? What I see people that are like really seemingly successful from my perspective or the outside have a team of people that they've hired. So like they kind of hire and pay for a marketing agency that they work out of their house, or everyone works remotely or something. And so, but it feels like there's this big gap between like, I'm an independent creator and I need promotion, of people that aren't parasitic, that don't want your money up front and promise you bot Twitter like followers. Like that's definitely not it. Especially like if someone's messaging you as a creator, asking you to pay them money, they're probably not valid. Like you should be looking for them, and they should be a valid thing that you can, like it's the wrong direction. But yeah, there's some big gap between me hiring a marketing agency and being a solo person. That could be someone's whole job is like actually caring about your work and wanting to promote it because that's what they love about life or something. I don't know. I haven't found that. There is a woman I did a podcast episode with. Her name's Marsha. Botch her last name. She has a program called Write Your Damn Book and Own Your Life. Own Your Life. It's a great podcast. She's done like episode 300 or 600 or something, really high up. And she's a wonderful human being. Went through her own like difficult stuff recently, and she has incredible way of doing stuff. But she has this way. She like created a publishing company. It was Write Your Damn Book. That's like she had worked with so many publishers with her own books that she's like, these are all parasites. I'm going to create the publishing company of my dreams, and the publishing company that doesn't rip off authors, that actually supports authors. Because they said, like, just to dive in, since we're wrapping up. It's a long wrap up.
Let's do this. Let's get into it.
She was saying that most publishing companies do this thing where they charge you a fee to be a part of their program to help you write your book, and also they own a percentage of the IP of that book title as like a co-author or co-producer. And so you don't own your own art anymore. She's like, it makes sense to like pay someone. She does this. She gets paid by people to help guide the writing process and hone it and like help with the editing and like keeping the idea consistent and also marketable. And she's super inspiring and does a great job. But as a publishing company, you own all of she'll publish your work if she likes it, but you own 100% of the rights to it. So like, that's cool. Or a publishing company could be like, hey, you go write your book, and then we'll take a cut of your ownership of the rights of that art to be your publishing company, but not both. And she said almost everyone every company she worked with was like did double dipping and thought that was super unethical. And it's like, okay, I want to work with you. You know, like if you're going to break it down and then create something to disrupt the industry in an ethical way, it's like, okay, I'll support you forever and I'll mention you on my podcast.
Yay.
But I was talking to her about,
sounds awesome.
She wants to help with the creation of this like book writing course, and she's already does her own course. So that's also cool that she's like willing to like collaborate. But it'd be cool to have you, since you've got you be unique in that you have a narrative where most people that I'm working with are writing memoirs. There's one other person who has a narrative that I'd like to bring in. But
yeah, for sure.
Fun stuff. Creative.
Yeah. Artists. We're crazy.
Yes. We're definitely driven to like by something else. We're like, I see the rest of the world and I'm like, I'm going to buy a house and have babies. I'm like, yeah, sure. But I won't, don't you want to make a movie at some point? Or
yeah.
What's your creative outlet?
I want to leave something behind.
Yeah.
That makes a difference in someone's life.
Yeah. Thank you, Sian, for coming on the Witness Underground podcast. It's been a pleasure. I'd like to do another deep dive into your author work at some point.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been awesome.
Cool. Anywhere, where can people find you and your work?
I'm on Instagram at SJ Krubek, Krubeck. TikTok is the same name. I think that's it. I think just those two. I can only handle 2 at a time, apparently.
Okay. And the film editing is sort of not right now, but if somebody really likes your work and they liked Witness Underground, they could possibly get you on board as an editor. Yeah,
that's sianfilm.com. That's about it. I don't have any socials.
So we can reach out to you there. All right, we'll add those in the links in the show notes. You have to call me
on this very strange number in a telephone box on the corner of Denver. That's how you'll reach me.
Works for me.
Yep.
Are you in Denver now?
I'm in Boulder.
Oh, Boulder.
To move
cool.
More into Denver area.
Yeah.
Boulder's too.
I didn't know that. I thought you were still out east because you were in Georgia for a long time, right? Like when we edited the film, it was remote.
Yeah, I was in Georgia then, but now I'm in Colorado again.
Cool. I lived in Boulder for years. That's where we met. Mm-hmm. Nice.
You lived in a very strange house with many people. And I knocked on the door. I was like, hey, I've got a meeting with Scott today. And I walked in. You were asleep in a corner on a shelf. I was like, who is this guy?
Oh, man, that's hilarious. Yeah, I lived at the Radish Collective. It was it still exists in Boulder. You can go hang out with those people. There might even be still some core members that were like early back in the day still living there. It's like a anarchist commune that sort of morphed from its original ideologies to, well, probably something more sustainable to keep it running. But it's a really cool, ambitious project, and I learned a lot living there. I still think of it often, and I'm still friends with some of the people I met there. I was just talking to one of them yesterday. Yeah,
nice.
But that's a funny way to meet me. I was only there over the course of a year, but yeah, it was a very different time. I was doing some personal explorations.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, let's wrap it up. Thank you, Sian, again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Take care.